this is the most consistent thing I have done for potential business outreach in my 5 years, without a doubt. I've had months, where I would call people through my sphere and, text them or whatever and, stick to various plans here or there. But it honestly, it's a dopamine hit when someone comments on your stuff. It's a dopamine hit when they comment back to me.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, it's put me back in connection with people that I haven't spoken to in a while. And it's a great way for me to catch up with students and see what they're doing with their life. And, you just never know when that's ultimately going to turn into business.
I am excited to share today's podcast episode because the idea to record this came from a text message that I received from a very good friend who's also been a student and someone who practices what he is taught. And the specific topic for today, as you could probably already guess based upon my tone, is going to be around social media, which is obviously my bread and butter. But more specifically, we're going to be talking about using social media for prospecting. And the way I like to use it, articulated, is the word outreach. The most underutilized, the most underused aspect of social media, because we as a society are so consumed on content that we forget that there's a lot of opportunity in outreach. And that is why I'm bringing Brian Quinlan on the show today. Many of you know Brian from the Drunk on Social side of things. But Brian today is going to be our guest because I think he is a shining light to the majority of our real estate industry who hasn't necessarily been around the block forever, or finds themselves right now questioning your existence. Maybe should you switch a career? Brian comes to us from a previous career as a teacher and relatively new to the industry. And so I'm going to stop right there, Brian, and let you kind of give an introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you are so relatable. That's what we're really going to talk about today is relatability. To hopefully lift up some real estate agents around the industry, but also talk about what you've been doing with outreach and how it's impacting your business. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, man. This is cool. So, I've been on the Drunk on Social podcast, which was fun, and I've been following Lab Coat Agents since I started real estate back in, I think it was 2020 when y'all kicked this off ish, and so it's cool to be on this. So
Yeah,
thanks. Uh,
absolutely. Well, by the way, Lab Coat Agents has been around since 2012.
oh, no way.
hmm
Okay, my
hmm
bad. I
Yeah,
wasn't.
I became a part of it in 17. So I think you just told us you got into real estate in 2020-ish
That is correct. So
during
as you
COVID.
guys said, I was a teacher, and I did that for 20 years. And this kind of side story to that is my wife and I had the glorious opportunity to pay off our house. And so that gave me the flexibility to be able to kind of choose a new path for myself. Being a teacher, you get really comfortable in that job. As long as you don't overly screw something up, it's a very secure job. And so, and I guess kind of to toot my own horn a little bit, I was really popular among the students and parents. And so to step away from that career to find something else to do was not an easy decision. And ultimately, it came down to it was just something I didn't want to do anymore. And so the hard part for me was trying to determine what it is I really wanted to go do in a new phase of my life. And my wife and I had talked about it. And I said, I really think I want to get into real estate. And she goes, all right, that's what you want to do. I was like, okay, that's great. So one of the things that when I finally made the decision, real estate was the way I wanted to go, was the realization that there's a whole lot of teaching or being a teacher that goes into being a realtor. And so when I often hear, there are a lot of teachers that either do real estate on the side or transition into becoming a full-time realtor, that's a very common transition. It makes a lot of sense because, I often say, working with first-time home buyers especially is my jam because, we get to sit down. I get into absolute teacher mode at that point and really lead them through the process. And so, yeah, I got in. The school year ended in May of 2020. That was my last time teaching, and I had already signed on with Keller Williams at that point. And right after Memorial Day, I transitioned into full-time real estate during COVID shutdown. And in a way, I think that was a really good time to do it. I mean, obviously, financially, a lot of realtors really blew up during COVID quarantine. And, obviously, it wasn't hard to sell houses. I was more of a buyer's agent at that point. So the challenge was, finding homes for people to buy, dealing with multiple offers and that kind of situation. But when I say it was a good time to get into real estate, I say that because I didn't have past experience to go back and say, you know, this is nothing like anything we've ever dealt with. That's all I've known, for the 5 years that I've been doing it. And so, um, I often hear old time realtors talk about, I remember when interest rates were 15, 18%. And I remember when homes sat on the market for 5, 6 months and that was just normal. I haven't had that. And so now where we're kind of transitioning maybe back into the longer days on market, that's something that I have to get used to. But the entire 5 years I've been doing this has been a slow transition from, the insanity of homes pending in hours or a day at most to now here we are sitting where homes are on the market for, 25, 30 plus days. And that's just kind of becoming the new normal. But it's just been a constant transition. And, that's not so bad.
There's a lot to unpack right there. The first question, well, actually, I want to digress for a second. I've got several questions. I want to go back to the teaching. So, what did you teach?
Uh, Primarily sixth grade math. Over my 20 years, my first 8 was elementary. So I was a second grade teacher, then a third grade teacher, then a fourth grade teacher, where you teach everything. And then I transitioned into our middle school and just did sixth grade math for the last 12 years.
Hmm. Awesome. And when you say, you were a popular teacher, which knowing you, I can see that. I would imagine you were probably into sports coaching, that sort of thing.
I did a few coaching gigs. I was a seventh grade assistant girls basketball coach for a couple of years, and then I was a long distance track coach, which was the funniest part because I never ran track in my life. And my buddies were like, "Oh, dude, it's so easy. All you gotta do is tell them to run and turn left. No problem." And I mean, I was probably a terrible track coach, but my guys were successful, so I'll take it. So yeah, I did that for 3 years, but when I transitioned over to the middle school, it allowed me the opportunity to get into announcing. And my first college degree is actually sports broadcasting. And so, not that I would say there's a lot of what I learned in college into doing that. It's maybe just the more comfortableness of being behind a microphone and talking to, a large group of people. And so I still do that today. So starting back in, I guess that would have been 2008, I started being the PA announcer at our middle school for football games, and that kind of blew up into basketball games. And I would do some things at the high school. I was an MC for conferences that our high school would host. Um, so now, even though I don't teach at the school district anymore, I still am the PA announcer for our very successful high school football team and our high school basketball team, and then fill in here and there. So yeah, I definitely still stay active with the sports stuff around the school district.
That's cool. And that's kind of part of what leads us into the topic today. And before I get into it, and this is super relevant because there are a lot of real estate agents that first of all, left. There's a. I would argue, and I don't know this data, but this industry is probably as big as it is one of the fewest has probably the fewest amount of professionals that got out of college and said, I'm going to become a real estate agent. I think it's a very common industry that you go into another career and then you shift to real estate. And we also know that there was a massive influx of licenses obtained during COVID. And I don't think you're one of them that it was COVID driven. I think you had your mind made up before because COVID was March-ish, and
Yeah,
then you kind of retired like 2 months later, right?
yeah. Actually, I had started taking the real estate exam in the previous summer, so 2019.
Got it.
Uh, I passed the Indiana one the first time. Unfortunately, I didn't pass the national one by one question. Thank you very much. So it took me, I think, three more times to finally pass the national one. And first of all, like my wife and I had agreed, I was doing one more year of teaching. So even if I had passed it that summer, I was still going to teach for the school year because I'm not the kind of person who just ditches the school district, last minute and then they got to scramble. I know that that's a huge pain. And so um, I knew I was coming back anyways. Now, psychologically, had I passed in the summer, it might have been hard to continue, but it is what it is. So I didn't pass the test then until Thanksgiving break. And then I kind of, as soon as I was officially licensed with the state, I went over to KW because I knew that's where I wanted to be. Signed up with them in December with the idea that the next 5, 6 months I was going to start to learn the business, maybe pick up a deal or two here on the side. And then I knew I was going to leave at the end of the school year and transition into this full time. So, no, COVID had nothing to do with it. It just got me out to do it earlier than I planned.
Hmm. It's such it's also a testimony, I think to so many that, the opportunity that does exist. Now, I say that tongue in cheek because when you think about the number of real estate agents, and I put that in quotations, that did get their license. And by the way, the testimony that I was speaking of, I left out an important part of. A teacher had a hard time passing the test. So for those of you that struggled to pass the real estate test, don't feel so bad because
I will tell you, as a teacher, that test aggravated the shit out of me because the feedback you get after the test is okay, well, here are the 6 categories of questions. You scored high, medium, or low in this category, and that's it. I don't know which questions I got wrong. I don't really know, okay, so I did medium in this category. What did I do well in that category? What did I do? Like, there's no way to know how to go and prep to take the test again.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's absolutely frustrating.
So yeah, I thought I found that fascinating. I didn't know that about you. That's funny. And I've obviously with a mortgage background and both obviously both backgrounds, that one's equally hard. And there's a lot of people that really beat themselves up about how hard it is to pass that test. And they're like, gosh, I'm smart. I got straight A's in school and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And it's like it's kind of a guessing game, and it's really just a memorization of terms basically. And it's how well can you memorize things?
So I told you I was a math teacher. When I went and took the test for a fourth time in November, they completely changed the test. It was a whole new test group that created it. So I'm really going into that thing thinking, well, I've really no clue what to do. And during that test, I remember telling myself, I wish there was more math on this test. Out of the 80 or 90 questions, whatever it is, there may have been 5 or 6 math questions. And I was like, man, those are the
Yeah.
ones I want. And most
Yeah.
people want to shy away from that. And I remember after about 5 questions, I'm like, well, I'm not going to pass this test. What am I going to do? And, obviously, thankfully at the end comes on the screen, you passed. I think I did a little dance down the hallway. It was, you know,
It's
it was,
relatable. That's relatable. Now, what I was going to say next is I think, and I don't know the data here, but the number of agents that did get their license over that 2 year period versus the number of agents that have since left the industry, my guess is that it's very high, greater than 50%, probably greater than 75%, because it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like the industry has done such a and I use this word loosely, good job of marketing. Um, Also, I could argue that that's bad because it's made the industry feel so flashy and easy,
yeah,
and I can control my time, and I can have this amazing career, and I can make all this money, and I get to do cool videos and walk around houses, and that's not how it is.
no, I remember when I first started, um, again, I was licensed in November. thought I could maybe get a deal here or two on the side before the school year ended, which didn't happen. I did have a client who was a teacher buddy of mine, so he was my first sale, and it was helpful that during COVID times school was limited, and so we would actually get to go look at houses, when school ended or whatever. So, uh, what I'm getting at is the first few deals is like you're drowning in all of the things you have to know that you didn't really learn in real estate school. So you're kind of, thankfully, I was on a really good team where I had a transaction coordinator and people that I could go to for help and advice. And I just remember thinking and saying, I don't know how people do this part time because there's so much involved. And granted, I got in and at a time where if someone wanted to go look at a house, you had to plan that for the next hour and get out the door. It wasn't, there was no calmness to it. You had to try and get out there and get your offer ready. And that's not normal prior to 2020. And so, my saying that I don't know how people do that part time. Well, back when it was a little more relaxed and people could kind of work around a schedule of, all right, well, I got to work at school today. I can show you a house tonight. During quarantine, that was not an option.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're one of the survivors. And my guess is you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I have no intention of getting out. I really enjoy the job. I'm not going to lie and say that I love my job because, it's a job.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy what I do. I enjoy talking to people. I still like going to look at houses. Um, I know that in the real estate world, the pundits will tell you that, the money is in listings, and I don't disagree because a lot of times if you get a listing, you're probably helping them buy a house too. I prefer working with buyers, which is weird for people to say, I think, but I just enjoyed that process more than going to talk to somebody about listing their house and then sticking a sign in the yard. And obviously, there's marketing and all that goes with it, but still, it's just different.
Mhm.
I like the process of teaching people about buying houses, answering all their questions. Again, it goes back to the teacher part of me, I think.
Yeah.
And so, I really do enjoy it, and I am blessed to be in the financial position that we are, that, if there is a lean month here or there, we're not going to have to put my house up for sale, and I'm not going to have to go work at Amazon to make some money. Not that I have anything against that. If I had to, I certainly would. But
Mhm.
at this point, we're fortunate, and both of our kids are not in college and living their adult lives, and so, we're fortunate.
Yeah. Empty nesters.
That's right.
The thing that you mentioned there about buy side versus list side too is that, again, uh, we're taught a lot of what we learn in this industry, and it's typically the big bad super successful person standing on a stage that you see on social media that kind of convinces you. And now you mentioned it, it made me think about it for a second, because when you really think about either side of the coin, they are very different. Like the buy side is very consumer facing, potentially more tedious, time consuming, but also potentially rewarding because it requires less of a sale. It's more of a relationship. Whereas the list side, although it can be very relationship driven, it is more who's the most articulate, who can go sit down in a living room and sell them,
Right.
and I think as a real estate agent, if you're struggling with this or you feel like, well, am I a newbie in the business because I like the buy side? No, I think there's two very different sides to it. And just because you like the buy side, you know what you're signing up for versus the list side. Because the truth is, I think, Brian, most humans are more cut from the cloth of being a buyer side agent, and it takes a unique individual to be a listing side agent, especially in a competitive market, because that's when the articulation comes into play.
When I was considering becoming a realtor, one of the things that I would often say about myself is I'm not a salesperson. So if there was hesitation in getting into the real estate world, that was it. I'm not a salesperson. That's just not my gig. I'm not pushy with people, to get them to spend money or donate money or anything like that. And so to think that, that was going to be part of the gig for me was kind of like, oh, well, okay. But realtors need to understand that they can choose, they don't have to pigeonhole themselves to being a list agent or a buyer's agent or whatever. Do what you're comfortable with and where you have success at. And, going back again to me being a teacher, I'm comfortable sitting down with people, talking to them about the process and kind of leading them along step by step. And to me, that, like you're kind of talking about, the sales agent is more, sorry, the list agent is more of, I think, the salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And the buyer's agent is more a relationship. And then, you talked about it being rewarding. I mean, unless you're working with an investor, I suppose, the majority of the time you're getting someone into a new house that they're going to be living in. And what a joyous day that is for those people. And I love being a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I want to shift, and so we've kind of talked about, I think a lot of things that are very relatable that a lot of people can just listen to this and say, yeah, I feel it, and maybe there's some inspiration in there. But being that you are where you're at in your career, and again, I guess fortunate, I've kind of been along the ride with you to a degree, and I'd love for you to share kind of your story about how it's gone. You've mentioned that you started with Keller.
Yep,
You're wearing on your sweatshirt now a Dr. Dre sweatshirt.
that's right.
I kid, I
Daniel's
kid.
Real Estate.
You're current. You left Keller. You went to Daniels. And so what I'd like to hear is what that progression has kind of been like for you, but also what have you found to be the strategies that have been the most effective for you as you're just kind of winging this and trying to figure this out, which obviously will lead us into the original intent of the conversation in the first place.
So I have been doing this a full 5 years, and my first three was all with Keller Williams. When I joined KW, I specifically wanted to work on a team that was there. It was our managing brokers team. And I got into this in 2020, really end of 2019. We had just sold our house and bought a house with an agent who was on that team.
Mm.
And so that was still fresh in my head. It was the end of 2017. Still fresh in my head, had a really good experience with that agent, developed kind of a friendly relationship. And I really just felt very comfortable when I went to go talk to KW before I officially signed with them, learning about how they do their brokerage. It's a very learning centered brokerage. And I know a lot of agents who have been in the business for a while will tell you a lot of people start with KW because they learn the business and then they end up leaving and going elsewhere because they don't need necessarily the splits that KW does with their commissions. And so I joined that team pretty much right away. I liked the mentorship. I liked the opportunity to kind of develop my own business, but still have support there. And my wife and I like to vacation, as you know, Jeff. And so, when we're out of town, being on a team where I can kind of let my business be taken over by somebody else to assist is huge for me. And so, I've been able to take several vacations where I didn't necessarily have to worry about deals that were going on because I had reliable people to help me out. And that was great. And while there, they're a bit more old school there, sitting down, making phone calls to people, door knocking. Maybe I'm fortunate to have gotten into this during COVID because door knocking was not a thing during that time. And I still to this day, even though it's become more normal, I'm not someone who's going to go knock on random people's doors and talk to them about, potentially listing their house. Not at all comfortable with that. I'm not really a huge fan of just cold calling people. Again, just not really my personality, not who I am. And so the team that I was on gave us the flexibility to kind of do however we wanted with our business, but still, with mentorship and encouragement and, a bit of a thumb down on us every now and then to make sure we're doing what we're doing. That's sort of where it started. And that was great for me for several years. Did that for 3 years and then realized, what? I know a lot about this business now, and I believe I could transition somewhere else where the pay would be better for me. And I knew that the team I was on, the pay structure wasn't going to change, especially in comparison to where I'm at now with Daniel's Real Estate. And so I certainly appreciate Sean and his generosity there. And so, being able to transition over here has been a great switch for me. both financially and business wise. You're going to ask sort of my path. Well, if I wasn't door knocking and I'm not calling random people, how was I generating business? Well, I was put into the pipeline of the Dave Ramsey ELP situation that my broker was a part of. My wife and I are graduates of Financial Peace University. That's, sort of what got us on the path to pay off our house. So my managing broker slash team owner, he was like, "Hey, I'm going to put you on the Dave Ramsey list because you know how to talk to those people." That was great. And so I got several deals in my 3 years there, thanks to the Dave Ramsey people.
Hmm.
But that evolved over time. Obviously your sphere starts to catch on to the fact that you're a realtor, and then other business pops up here and there. And so where it was the majority of my business early, it wasn't so much at the later time. And so my path towards, I guess, outreach for clients has really evolved into social media for the most part.
Hmm.
And that is much thanks to you and Tristan. Like I said, I started following Lab Coat Agents. Then you guys got Drunk on Social started, and I became a part of that. And I feel that the mentorship that you guys have provided through that, just I love the fact that Drunk on Social was geared towards realtors and loan officers too, but primarily realtors. So you're speaking to me, and so I resonated with that. I really took to that. I like you know the encouragement that you guys give, but at the same time, the reality that you propose. It's like this is how you should be doing business on social media. And these are how you make the videos. And so it was a learning process. And again, the teacher in me loves the learning process. And it was the mentorship, the fact that you guys are very accessible and we can reach out to you with questions or whatever has been great. And so that to me became the reality of the majority of how I do reach out to people is through social media. And
Let me stop you there for a second,
yeah,
yeah, and ask you why, what is it that you think sparked that? What is it that made you like, did you have a point like at the early part of your career where you were kind of assessing, all right, let's see, here's my list: door knocking, leads, cold calling, social media. Like, how did you come to say, okay, this is the path that I really want to attack, knowing I got to sprinkle in some other things, but like, how did you assess that?
probably number one, where you have said multiple times on meetings, webinars, and whatever, that this is the new way. This is your CRM, actually. That's
Mhm.
probably the words that resonate with me the most is, okay, yeah, it is. I mean, we're all on social media so many hours a day, and you're getting in front of faces that some that you don't know. And so that to me was an easy way to utilize my CRM, was something I was already doing anyways. And going back to my background with, my first degree being sports broadcasting. When I was a teacher, I was in charge of the morning news crew at our middle school for 7 or 8 years, and so there was a lot of camera, being on camera stuff. I've always been super comfortable being on video. I know that that's one of the big hangups that people have with social media is they just don't, they have an issue with how they sound or how they look or whatever.
Mhm.
That's never been a problem for me, and I generally don't mind making an ass of myself sometimes. And so I was very comfortable, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't mind making videos. I actually like it. I know some people, one of their big complaints with making videos is editing. They don't know how to do that, or I actually like the creative process of it. The challenging part for me is coming up with ideas, I suppose. But once I have something, I'm cool with going ahead and creating that. And so it was just a very nice combination of, okay, this is my CRM. Let's make some videos and do posts that get in front of people and hopefully start to spark conversation. And it's significantly easier than me cold calling people and door knocking with people that I don't necessarily know, and let's see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that progression and now what's happening today. And again, the whole premise for this conversation. And so, how's it going? What is it that you feel like? You know, now that you've got almost 5 years in the industry, you are at a point where, you've probably established you've tried some things that you're like, trash, and you've tried some things you're like, I got to go even further with this. So tell us about those things.
It's one thing is if people, I'm sure they realize this, but if not, it's constantly evolving, and you and Tristan seem to, and a number of other people that I follow also seem to have your finger on the pulse of, okay, here's what's working on Instagram now. And I'll be honest, I'm not taking the time to look at the analytics of that kind of stuff. Uh, I follow Mosseri on Instagram, but at the same time, I'm not listening to every single word he says.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's always evolving. So is our static posts working now, and months from now they're not? Is video in my video, do I have to be dancing? Do I have to be pointing at random things on the screen? That's seemingly gone away now.
Yeah.
And it's more authentic video now, which I'm totally cool with. And so, there's the evolution of it, and it's constantly evolving. And so you have to be willing to make changes with that, and pay attention to uh, who's doing what's working, and try those things, I suppose.
Hmm.
I forget where that question was supposed to go.
Well, what do you
Oh,
what do
no.
you what do you find
Uh,
working? Yeah.
yeah. So uh, several months ago, you were offering a terrific deal on the Fitzer Media done for you content, and I hopped on that. And I've said multiple times, I've sent you text messages. I love it. And I mean, I get to my desk here in the morning, and it's like, all right, what's Jeff got for me today? And I will go and see what the post is for the day. I don't use all of them, but that's not your intention, is for everyone to use all of them. But
Right.
it takes the pressure of the creativity part, where I sometimes struggle with trying to come up with something creative. It's content that resonates with me and hopefully my audience. And I will wind up posting those to Instagram and Facebook, and hoping to get some feedback, some comments, likes. But uh, some are great, some are not, but it's content I didn't have to create myself.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. Then January, we had our first social genius call, and you had said this was something that you needed to do more of as well, which was social prospecting, which is the purpose of today's call.
Hmm.
And I was like, that okay. So for those who weren't on that particular call, Jeff showed a spreadsheet that he has with all of his contacts in it, and him having sort of a map for reaching out to his people. And
And to give context, it's like my CRM. It's past clients, it's SOI, it's clients I want to gain, it's that sort of thing. It's something that everyone should have that list, regardless of social media.
there you go. And so he challenged us to come up with our own system. Didn't have to use the spreadsheet that he uses, but either way, come up with our own system to reach out to people. And the part of that that really hit home with me was, if you cold call people, even your friends and family, if they can ignore your call. And some of them, if you bug them too much, will get to the point where they're blocking your calls or blocking your text messages. You don't necessarily know what's happening, but it is. And same thing with emails. People can throw your emails into the trash. People can set it up where your emails, never actually see their inbox. And I have found that through my actual CRM, I have kind of a monthly or weekly thing that I send out to people, that I have myself on that list and I have my wife on that list. And I'm like, hey, Steph, did you get that email today? She goes, no. Well, it's in her spam. And that isn't something she set up. It's just the way that her Gmail works, and it flagged it as spam. And so I still don't know how many people don't get those messages. So your suggestion to people was to use your social media as your prospecting tool, because when you reach out to somebody on social media, whether it's a comment or a message or both, they're very unlikely to block you, because social media we all, many of us anyway, do social media for the social aspect of it and for the dopamine boost that it gives us when someone comments on your stuff. And so if you're making a comment to them, they're not likely going to block you. Their dopamine is going to be triggered and they're going to be like, "Hey, great, he commented." And the bonus to all of that is it trips the algorithm in those systems where now that person's stuff is likely to show up more in your feed and you are now likely to show up more in their feed. And that to me was like, yes, that is exactly what I'm looking for. And the key ingredient to that you gave us, Jeff, was this is not intended to be business. So you're not making comments, you're not sending them messages trying to ask them if they're ready to buy or sell a house, if if they're looking to make a move, or hey, do you know anybody looking to make? No, that's not it. It's literally just being social.
Yep.
And the more you show up in their feed, the more they're going to remember the fact that you're a realtor. And so I was like, yeah, this is great. So what I wound up doing with your suggestion was I went through my actual CRM and I downloaded my entire list of contacts. Then I went over to Facebook and I went through all of my Facebook friends, and I don't know, I've got 700 or 800. And I started adding people from that friend list who I knew were not already on my spreadsheet that I had created, and started moving them over there. And it wasn't necessarily everybody in my 700 or 800, because obviously there are people in there that I may not know or may not be close to, but especially people that I know that I also know I haven't seen in my feed for a while. I definitely want to move them over. And then I did the same thing with Instagram. And so I wound up with, several hundred people on my list. Going back to my KW days, they had a suggested check in with your sphere. It's called DTD2, which is taking two letters of the alphabet and combining them together as your outreach for on a weekly basis. So I created my spreadsheet based on those letter combinations. And I just sat down on a Monday morning and I put it in my calendar 5 days a week, where I'm spending anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes every morning. And I just go from the top of my list down, and however many I get through, I get through. I will either visit them on Facebook, I'll visit them on Instagram, and I will check and see. There are some people who just don't post. If I realize, here we are in February, if I realize that someone has not made a post on Facebook or their Instagram since November or earlier, I'm like, all right, well, they're not doing a whole lot. So commenting on something like that isn't necessarily
Right.
getting me anywhere, but I might send them a message.
Yeah. It doesn't mean they're not there. In fact,
Oh, absolutely.
there's a pretty good chance they're just scrollers.
Yes. And my wife used to be like that. She used to, before she got on Facebook herself, she would go to my Facebook and just, I called her a Facebook voyeur. And, there's a lot of people that are like that. And so I will send them a private message through Facebook or Instagram just to check in to see how they're doing. How's your job going? How are your kids? Whatever. And so that took me about a month and a half to get through my entire list. And now here I am. And I missed very few days. I'm not gonna say I did it every single day for, Monday through Friday, but it's always on, like, first thing in the morning is what I do. And it's been very effective. I'm not gonna say I've gotten any business out of it in a month and a half, but I'm starting to see a lot more faces that I haven't seen in a while start to show up in my feeds.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it how you just said that too, because that's the reality of, really, honestly, any marketing, any strategy. And Brian, I preach this to everyone, that our industry is the most shiny object chasing industry that exists on the planet. And it's a perpetual shift and pivot to the next shiny object, because we're looking for the golden goose that doesn't exist. And so it doesn't matter if it's social media, or if it's farming a neighborhood, or if it's door knocking, or if it's leads. If you're not willing to commit 12 to 24 months to any plan, you're wasting your time. You might get lightning in a bottle once,
Yeah.
but that's all it's going to be. And then so if no matter what you commit to. And so for those of you that don't know me very well, the reason why I lean so far into social is because of the fact that you can do this on a very small, if not $0 budget.
Yeah.
And it's a long game, a 1,000,000% long game. And I'm gonna read to you Brian's Brian's text that he sent me, because what resonated with me, first of all, he sent me a text saying, he's been doing the thing. And then the second comment was, it's brought a lot of joy to me. I've reconnected with past students. That has triggered the algorithm to suggest people I know, which reconnects me with more past students, etc. Right? And so every one of you that's listening to this today, like what Brian's talking about now is just a very simple discipline. And here's why this is so hard, because the algorithm owns you, you don't own the algorithm. And so for many of you, like Brian, you sit down at your desk in the morning, you're like, all right, let's go, let's open up Instagram, let's open up Facebook, let's go down the list, let's see who's posted. And before you know it, you're watching cat videos, dog videos, golf videos, sports videos, whatever it is that the algorithm is showing you. And an hour later, you're like, damn it, I forgot why I was even here. I just wasted my time. I got to get back to traditional things, right? And what Brian is describing right now, I have zero doubt in my mind is going to turn into business, because now, remember what he said in the beginning. He was a popular teacher. So he already has an advantage over many of us, because he left a career where he has really unique relationships with these people. These people already have a quote unquote raving fan mentality towards you as a teacher. So as they begin to learn that he's moved on to another career, which they will, because he's connecting with them, the algorithm's not going to show them Brian. These people are invariably going to say, honey, when we buy or sell, we are using our old math teacher. Like, how cool is this, right? And I guarantee that conversation is going to happen in a living room, maybe multiple times. And you all, everybody listening to this has this ability. Like, if whether you came from a corporate job or you came from, listen, like Brian, if you came out of college, like I tell my daughters this, I'm like, stay connected to your people. Like, all of the people that you're in the fraternity with, that you're in the class with, that you went to high school with, that's your SOI. And it doesn't matter where we are in our world, whether we're faith-based, whether we are non-faith-based, like we all have circles, we have tribes, and we're doing a really shitty job of staying in touch with them. And what Brian is doing is like, I can't wait to watch this journey. You're actually doing a better job than me, Brian. I've done a shitty job of being intentional about it. I do it naturally, but not intentionally. And you're doing it intentionally. And that's what I think needs to happen. And I'd love for you to share an example. So you mentioned, the joy that has been brought to you. Give us an example of what that meant.
So one of the things that you had read off there was that, I'm reconnecting with students from the past. And, now as you start to bring in new people to your sphere on Facebook and Instagram, it starts to suggest more people to you, and people that you may know, because, it connects you together. And so, my list has grown in the month and a half. I've probably added, I don't know, 15 to 20, maybe plus people to my list. And the majority of them are former students. And so it's cool to, when I taught them, they were 12. And now, I'm seeing kids that are in college, just graduated college. My oldest group of students, when I started teaching in 2020, no, sorry, in 2000, are now in their 30s, early 30s. And some of them I'm still friends with through social media. And so, I am fortunate that they're kind of entering or close to their peak, I want to buy my first house age.
Yeah.
And so that has been great. Now, I will tell you a story not related to this particular social prospecting, but going back to something you just said. Last August, it's a Saturday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast, and I get this random text message from a parent of a former student. And she says, "Hey, aren't you a realtor? Because we're thinking about wanting to buy a house down in Bloomington. Wonder if you could help us out with that." I was like, I pretty much, I shouted for joy, especially when I looked up the house, and the house was $700,000. I was like, well, yeah, let's go. Uh, so I was their daughter's sixth grade math teacher, and that daughter and myself are Facebook friends. But that is the only interaction that we have. We follow each other. I would, not necessarily intentionally like I am now, but I would comment on her stuff. They're Cincinnati Bengals fans, and so we'd occasionally talk football, whatever.
Hmm.
Her younger brother, I actually was not his teacher, but he wound up on the TV crew. So we worked together when he was a eighth grader, maybe even a seventh grader. And so, I do remember that when their daughter was a sixth grader, parent teacher conferences were very congenial with her parents, had a great conversation. We would occasionally talk every now and then throughout the school year, or if I would see them around school at other times, always friendly. And so they reached out to me specifically because their daughter had kept in touch with me and they liked me. And it took a while. I actually had the closing on their house last week, and the home they bought was 600 plus $1,000. I'm like, well, great. And that was 100% because of staying in touch with those people through social media.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this definitely is something that if you haven't thought about it, honestly, it doesn't matter really what camp you're in because I know we're all guilty of it. And I'm case study 1A. I not only teach this stuff, I've not only built business around this stuff, and even I can look in the mirror and say, I'm not doing this to its fullest degree. And as I continue to just vomit this, and Brian, it's just it I don't see it changing anytime soon because I don't see many people doing it. But as I mention it and talk about it, and why I'm proud of you for doing it, and thank you for sharing it with me, is that it's it's going to be the people that get it. I think everybody gets it. I think everybody can look and listen to what we're talking about and be like, "Oh my God, that's so smart. Why am I not doing this?" Right? And say that to themselves, but the ones that actually follow through with it, which really kind of blows my mind. But then again, I have to like look back in the mirror and say, well, why aren't you doing it? And it's such an easy way that, and every time I stand up and preach this and talk about this, speak about it, I will tell audiences, you don't even have to create content. Now, you're leaving bullets out of the gun if you don't create content, but you don't even have to create content. Like just doing the outreach piece and understanding how effective it is you mentioned dopamine, right? Versus phone calls, text messages, emails, door knocking. Like that's invasive and hitting them with the feels, right? Where they choose to be and all these things psychologically, it just blows my mind that this is not more embraced. And I think it's just a matter of time. Um, you know what's going to happen, Brian? It's going to be a Gary Vee or somebody who you know, preaches it and everybody's going to jump on board. And I'm going to be like, damn it, that was my idea. Um,
Yeah, it's one of the things you just said there. It's easy. It is.
yeah.
Uh,
And free.
I know, and that's ultimately awesome, right? Um, I texted you recently, I think that same message you were reading. This is the most consistent thing I have done for potential business outreach in my 5 years, without a doubt. I've had months, where I would call people through my sphere and, text them or whatever and, stick to various plans here or there. But this is it honestly, it's a dopamine hit when someone comments on your stuff. It's a dopamine hit when they comment back to me.
Hmm.
I love it.
Hmm.
And, like I said, it's put me back in connection with people that I haven't spoken to in a while. And it's a great way for me to catch up with students and see what they're doing with their life. And, you just never know when that's ultimately going to turn into business. So,
I
uh,
love it. I love it. You know what you just said? It just reminded me of when I started my social media journey, when I would tell my wife, who was annoyed with me for always having the camera on, right? And being so
I get that.
disciplined to content. And I told her, I said the byproduct of this is that I am documenting the memories of our last child that I didn't do with our oldest children. And so the byproduct is that although the perception might be he's not present, I'm arguably, and this is from experience, more present because I had my finger on the camera trigger, like, oh, is she going to do something, which kept me really dialed in versus when I didn't have my camera on the ready, sometimes my mind was in another place. What's the score of the game? What's whatever was on my mind, right? And and so the byproduct to me of what Brian is doing and what we're talking about today is that first of all, it's not time consuming. You don't need to spend more than 10 or 15, 20 minutes a day. The most time consuming piece is building the list, connecting with the people. But once you do that and establish that, the actual time consumption is very minimal. And so the byproduct of that is dopamine. it's joy, as Brian said. Like at the very least, you're using social media as it was originally intended, which is
Yeah.
to connect with your people. And even though that is just a byproduct, that byproduct will be business. I have no doubt in my mind. And so I hope this helps some of you today. Brian, I want to ask you one last question. What's next? What's next for Brian? Where do you see your career going now that we've kind of talked about where the past has been? Where do you see the industry going, even though you don't have a deep experience in the industry? I'd love your perspective as a relative newbie to the industry. Where are you going, and where do you see the industry going in the next 5 years?
Um, I don't know that my going is going to change much. You know, I enjoy what I do. I'm personally feel I'm in a good place with the brokerage that I'm at. That's one of the things I love about Sean is he is very encouraging of our team. He's actually built his business off of social media quite a bit.
Cool.
And so that's one of the things that attracted me to this particular brokerage. But you know, he's always encouraging us to get out there and do videos, and he preaches, don't be a secret agent, and you know, put yourself out there. So that's actually something I need to do more is put myself out into the community. So I'm a weather wuss, and so where it's, you know, single digit degrees here, my butt is staying home for the most part and using the Fitzer Media stuff for my creation. But you know, when things get better around here, I intend to be out in the community and promoting things and trying to. I would really like to become a face of the South Side of Indianapolis. And so that I've started a YouTube channel that I'm feeding into as well. And you know, that's all of that. This is maybe the thing that bugs my wife more than anything is the amount of time I spend editing because I do a podcast. And when we have podcast episodes, by the way, it's called Real Estate Makes Us Drink for anybody who wants to go check that
Yes.
out.
Thank you for sharing.
But me and my lender buddy, we sit down, we have conversations, we have guests on, and our episodes are anywhere from 35 to 60 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Well, it takes me a while to edit that, and that doesn't sit well with her. In addition to other videos, my own personal YouTube page where I'm making videos and editing that. And so I'm not I'm not at the financial point where I'm ready to outsource
Yeah.
that yet.
Yeah.
And it may eventually come, but also I enjoy the editing process. Don't enjoy, you know, ticking off my wife that I'm spending hours on end at the computer. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's
But you know, I'm glad you said that because that is a part of there's going to be pain in everything you do. This is your pain.
it is, yeah. So that's where I see myself evolving over time, ideally becoming a face of the South Side of Indy, growing my YouTube channel. That's another place I'd like to see business come from. And thing about all of social media, it's all a long game.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to hit every now and then on something that may blow up and you may get business from that. But, you know, I'm not, I'd love it, don't get me wrong, but I'm not in this for the short gain of something like that because it's very unlikely. I understand it's a long game. I have to tell myself that multiple times as I see, you know, the views on my YouTube videos is not super high. And, you know, I'm believing it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that'll happen. Now, as far as the industry goes, one of the things that maybe led me to leave KW, and I see it kind of evolving. I believe that the big box brokerages are going to continue to become less effective, meaning people used to sign on with an agent from Coldwell Banker, Century 21, KW, you know, all the big box stores because that's what they knew and they were everywhere. But now I'm with a boutique brokerage. We have 20 to 25 agents on our team. And I think that's going to become more the norm than the big boxes simply because social media and, you know, putting ourselves out there, people learn to know, like, and trust you, and they want to work with you because of that, not because of the name on the sign.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, going to become more and more of a thing. And, you know, whether that means the big boxes merge together, you have to change what they do. I don't know, but
Yeah.
that's my problem. I'm not there anymore.
I like it, man. It's good perspective. I mean, it whether it's relevant to anyone out there, it's just interesting because it's things that we all need to think about depending on where we are in the journey. Now, Brian, we're obviously we're at the hour. I want to know what's the best way to connect with you. So, you mentioned Real Estate Makes Us Drink is the
Yep.
name of the podcast. Where do they find that at? Like, how do
That's
you?
it's YouTube
Okay,
under that name, but Brad also puts us onto every Audible podcast.
cool.
So basically anywhere you could find podcasts.
iTunes and all that stuff. And I say that to this audience because that's not necessarily the audience you're after, but use it as inspiration. Like go check it out as your own inspiration to create something like that with your lender partner.
Yeah.
Um,
And one of the things that led us to get into that was Gary Vee. He suggested people to start a podcast, not necessarily to get business out of it, but it creates content for you.
yeah.
And so I will put our podcast episodes into Opus clips that will AI generate them down into shorter
Works.
clips of whatever length I want them to be. And then I pick the good ones, might edit those together a little bit here and there, but it's already done for me. And then I can post that to social media. And, that's less time in terms of creation for me. And so that's one of the main reasons I do that. Um, Also, obviously, to maybe get some business out of it, but I got
Well, and
beers.
if I can add to that and challenge you guys a little bit too, the purpose, the reason why I do these podcasts is for relationships, is for connections.
Yeah.
Minimally, it's for the conversation. Honestly, for today, it's for the conversation. Most of the time, it's because I don't know the people and it's creating a new relationship. So when you're thinking about doing this on a local level, what you and your lender should absolutely do is try to find more people within the community that have a good story to tell, not only to tell the story, but now you just made a relationship with somebody who now is going to immediately, you're going to move up the list as a potential realtor and lender for them down the road. And it's an opportunity that is lost on a lot of people.
So along those lines, we did Real Estate Makes Us Drink for, I don't know, 7, 8 months. And then Brad said we maybe want to shift our focus on guests that we're having because we've had real estate guests on the show, inspectors, appraisers. I mean, many people in related to real estate in some
The
way.
boring stuff.
Exactly. And we had one guy on who had it was a lifelong friend of Brad's, and he had a great story to tell about how he was in the military, then started his family, and then had to take a job at a paper company in small town Indiana. And he has now grown into the director of North American sales for that paper company. And so that was a phenomenal episode. And he was like, dude, we need more of that. So we have episodes that are real estate related. We have episodes that we call success happy hours, where we sit down with someone who may have no connection to real estate whatsoever, simply because we hope it grows our audience and brings in more than just people interested in real estate. And they're great. We've had a local sports radio host on our show. We recently had director of operations from Sun King Brewery, free beer. Brad's a big tequila guy, so we've had other people in the
Like
alcohol. Yeah,
distributors or distillers.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
just, we find people that have success. I have a former student who played for the Kansas City Chiefs this year. I'm hoping to get him on the show.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. And we are evolving outside of just the real estate world because, real estate is a pigeonholed and sometimes boring. We're not going to get a huge audience. Let's be
Well,
honest.
it's diluted too.
Yeah.
Nobody needs any more of it. Um, what's your Geo-Driven channel called? To
Uh,
India.
you mean my YouTube
YouTube.
channel?
Hmm?
Move me to Indy.
Move Me to Indy. So that'd be a fun journey to watch because he is currently going through the pain of what it feels like to talk to a brick wall, which is normal.
Yep.
And then you are all over your socials. Where is the best place or places to connect with you on social?
Instagram or Facebook. I'm not confident in the future of TikTok, and I feel that that is also the one that's hardest to grow on. So I really don't post a lot over there. I watch it, but I don't really post a whole lot there. So my Instagram is the Realtor Indie, and then Facebook is just my name, Brian Quinlan. And yeah, absolutely message me over there. My email, if anybody ever want to send me something, move me to Indy at Gmail, and just like my YouTube channel.
I'm going to give you one last piece of advice. Um, because it's worked for me, and you know this, Ozarks, right? Is take that move to Indy concept and start weaving that more consistently into your personal brand. And that is where you might be able to pick up traction on a TikTok or maybe an Instagram, wherever. But again, that whole geo-driven, you know how I feel about it, only because I'm living it and it works incredibly well. And the reason why it works is because the algorithm eventually learns. And then you become the advocate. You become the aggregator of all the things. And so keep grinding on that YouTube channel. That's going to pay off as long as you stay consistent. And then, yeah, follow my footsteps, man. Start one place, broadcast it everywhere else, and before you know it, you become the local guy, and business starts to come in. So it becomes a low hanging fruit and bottom of funnel.
I'm here for it.
Good. Well, you know we're going to stay in touch, and maybe one of these days Brian's going to come hang out with me at the lake, and who knows, maybe I'll come visit him in Vindy at some point too. So.
Hey, all right. We're off here. I'm going to talk to you about that.
Right on. Thank you, Brian, for being on. Thank you for listening. This is a long episode. I hope this is useful for you. And do not hesitate to reach out to Brian. And listen, if you stayed with me this long, thank you. And if you've got a story to tell like Brian, I want to do more of this on the Lab Code Agents podcast. I want to tell more real stories. And so feel free, DM me, reach out to me, and let's have you on as a guest. And let's have a kick ass 2025.
Thanks.